Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us now. Colonel, welcome back to the show. Always a pleasure, my dear friend. Over the weekend, Colonel, the Senate of the United States passed and sent on to the House of Representatives a foreign aid package, which includes money for Taiwan and Israel. But I want to talk to you right now about the $61 billion it includes for Ukraine. I understand that some of this is cash, which must be spent in 2025 by whoever is president from and after January 20th, 2025, an interesting constitutional loop. But a lot of it, of course, is equipment. Question, how depleted is the Ukraine military, and of what value would this kind of aid be, even if it does pass the House and is signed by President Biden?
Well, to answer your question, keep in mind that much of what is being promised with the $61 billion will, in fact, not arrive for well over a year, maybe longer. We are not sending things that we already have on hand. We're sending things that we have to build. Our stocks are very, very low. We've sent about everything we can. So have the Europeans. So I don't think this has as much to do with Ukraine as most Americans think. Certainly, it's helping to maintain the facade that there is a viable government in Kiev that exerts some control over the country. I don't think it really does any longer. I think things are really simply falling apart. The military leadership is composed of people who are planning what I would call vengeance attacks, use missiles, drones, whatever they can find to harm Russians, primarily inside Russia. And then they're being helped by the SAS on the British side and others to launch the kinds of attacks you saw down in the Black Sea. None of them make any difference. None of them are going to change anything. So the first point to take away from this is most of this money is designed to enrich donors and keep assembly lines humming, which obviously is good for constituents. Doesn't do anything for the United States per se. I don't think it's helpful to us in the least. Strategically, it's self-defeating. But it keeps the Europeans in the game, so to say, as long as they stay in power, that is the globalist neocon elites. And it keeps us in the game, as you point out. But none of it's going to work. None of it's going to make any difference. Between now and then, the debt grows, our position weakens financially. Nothing good comes from it.
Here's the neocon position. This will irritate you, but not surprise you, I'm sure. It's a clip from Senator Mitt Romney on the floor of the Senate shortly before the vote on Sunday evening.
If we fail to help Ukraine, Putin will invade a NATO nation. He may delay his next invasion until he rebuilds his decimated military. But we must be clear-eyed. Ukraine is not the end. It is a step. If we fail to help Ukraine, China will eventually absorb Taiwan. If we fail to help Ukraine, NATO, the alliance that's prevented great power conflict for over 75 years, will falter and eventually disintegrate.
If that is the understanding, I'm not even going to talk about which party, although he's a Republican, or at least nominally. If that is the understanding of the Congress, it is totally divorced from reality, is it not?
Oh, I'd say so. The thing I most admire about Mitt Romney is his choice of suits, ties, the way he looks, how carefully his hair is managed. I mean, the man always looks tremendous, but he can't say anything without notes in front of him. And he's always reading from something that someone else wrote for him. I don't know what the man actually believes. It's all nonsense. It sounded to me like a more eloquent version of LBJ telling everyone that if we fail in South Vietnam, the Chinese and the Russians are going to march into Malaysia and all the way to Australia. It's sort of ridiculous.
But what is the significance of firing General Zaluzhny and hiring his replacement, the one they call, forgive me, his name is escaping me, Sarsky?
Seriously.
The one that his own troops refer to as the butcher of Bakhmut, from the way apparently he has treated his own men.
You know, this is a strange one. As I understand it, the Syrski's family actually lives inside Russia.
Hmm.
Family is not living in Ukraine. Not all of it, but a substantial portion of it. So that's the first odd dimension to this whole thing. Second thing is I'm told that he's really an instrument of MI6 in London and to a lesser extent the CIA. And Zelensky's running out of people who are loyalists, running out of anybody who's willing to follow his insane orders. And since the army itself is being rendered incapable of serious combat, thanks to all the casualties and losses, I think we're dealing with generals who are going to sign up for what I talked about earlier, these pointless attacks where the objective is to simply kill Russians, harm Russians, destroy Russian infrastructure. So I think that's about it. How long is this going to last? Well, you got to go back to Tucker's interview. And I think if there's one criticism I have for Vladimir Putin, one serious one, is that he's somewhat naive. I think he still believes that there's someone somewhere who's going to sign an agreement and help him end this war. I don't think that's going to happen.
So how does the war end when the government totally and completely collapses and there's no place for American aid to go?
Yeah, I think what President Putin has got to decide is how much longer he wants to wait for change in Europe. I mean, I'm still baffled by the fact that the same stooges are in charge in Berlin.
Right.
If there's one place that should have changed quickly, it's Berlin. But the Germans have demonstrated that they're willing to endure tremendous deprivation and harm to their own country under the leadership of this government. So, until that happens, I don't know who Putin's going to talk to. The government in Poland right now is kind of an EU transplant. I think there's a higher probability of that being removed in Poland before the Germans finally wake up and remove the people in Berlin. So I don't know what he's going to do. I think he's going to have to make a decision. Do I continue to waste time on this battlefield with the remnants of the Ukrainian military because I don't want to kill people, because he really doesn't? Or do I just march to the Dnieper and then prepare to cross it and go into Kiev? Now, we all know that the plan is to leave Kiev and go to Lvov in Western Ukraine. But at least that robs this government of any last remaining shred of credibility or legitimacy, because they can't defend themselves and they have nothing with which to resist the Russians. So I think that's one way it could end. I don't see too many others, because it's very obvious that we're not going to talk to him. And Judge, as we've said before, why would Moscow listen to anything we said?
Right. Well, you remember what he said what President Putin said to Tucker when he asked him if he would call Joe Biden. Do we have that clip, Chris? Watch this.
And so why don't you just call Biden and say, let's work this out?
What's there to work out? It's very simple. I repeat, we have contacts through various agencies. I will tell you what we are saying on this matter and what we are conveying to the US leadership. If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about? Or beg him for what?
And what messages do you get back?
You're going to deliver such and such weapons to Ukraine? Oh, I'm afraid, please don't. What is there to talk about?
I thought that was a great answer for him. But you notice whose name he didn't mention is Vladimir Zelensky. The war will be over when Joe Biden picks up the phone. There's nothing Zelensky can do about it. Your thoughts on what we just saw, Colonel?
Well, he knows that Zelensky's a puppet. That Zelensky is many things, but he's not a total fool. And that's why he was ready to sign up for that agreement that we went out of our way to crush with the help of Boris Johnson. And remember, I think Zelensky was told privately by everyone that spoke to him, whether it was Lindsey Graham or anybody else from Washington, D.C. or London, you stick with us. We'll provide you with everything. You will have the entire scientific, industrial, and military might of NATO and the United States behind you. You cannot lose. I think he bought it and decided to stick it out. And it was very obvious to him when he came back to the United States on more than one occasion to discover that whatever he thought he was going to get, he's not going to get. And there's not much that we can do for him. I mean, you can't build armies on the fly. We've talked about that.
Right.
That's absurd nonsense.
But can President Zelensky really enter into negotiations without fear of an assassination from the Banderites and the Nazis in his own military and security staff?
Well, I think the British have done probably the best job of securing his life. He's got British special ops types around him. So I think that's his ticket to survival at the moment. Will somebody get through and remove him? I have no idea. I have frankly expected a general officer or two from inside the Ukrainian army watching the debacle to finally step forward and say, that's it. Turn his force around and march on Kiev. It hasn't happened. I suspect they too are on the take. Everybody in Ukraine swims in a sea of corruption. Everyone is benefiting except the Ukrainian people. So I think the generals and the colonels are probably going to go along with this until somebody stops paying them.